What's going on? Connor Wilson from LaxAllStars.com. Today I'm going to show you how to string the 6-shooter pocket. Legendary. Welcome to the 6-shooter tutorial. Before we talk about the tutorial, how to string this pocket, let's talk about what a 6-shooter is. 6-shooter has, instead of 4 leathers, it has 6 runners. 4 of those are made out of leather, and the last is nylon. As you can see here, we've got a pretty standard traditional pocket with leather down the middle and runners on the left and right. That's the head on the left. The head on the right is the more traditional pocket. Both of them, you can kind of see, use the same interlocks, but the 6-shooter is a much tighter weave, and the ball will actually sit on all 4 leathers as opposed to sitting on 2 leathers and in between 2 leathers on a typical traditional pocket. Both the sticks on the left are 6-shooters. The stick on the right is a 6-diamond traditional. As you can see, the main point of differentiation is that both 6-shooter pockets, the one in the middle has a white runner, the one on the left has a red runner running down the side, which gives you 6 diamonds across. And that's where that 6-shooter name comes from. You can also tie them off in a couple different ways, or you can do a 6-shooter pita pocket. The important thing is that you have a tightly woven pocket. So let's get into it. Here's your setup. You're going to obviously want 4 leathers in your head. Pretty basic. Snazzy die on a Gate Recon XLU. Awesome new leathers from Stringer's Shack. Really love those. Big fan. Then you're going to put in your runners. Now I tie a little knot and run the string through the top hole. Now one thing that I'm going to do a little bit differently here is that I'm then going to run that same piece of string back through that top hole, and this creates a loop. The reason we do this is so that when we want to use this outside runner as a leather, we have a loop where we can put our crosslace through. Then you're going to tighten those all the way down so it's nice and wide. Basically, you're going to try and string a tennis racket pocket. So I've tightened my leathers down quite a bit, and my sidewalls are very tight. It's pretty wide right now. After I string it, it will become a little bit more narrow. Now that I've got that set up well, I'm going to loosen up my leathers in the front, and I'm going to pull them out just a little bit. Basically, probably half as far as I would usually pull them out for a typical traditional pocket or a pita pocket. As you can see, that would not result in a very deep pocket, but that's going to work. And it's going to allow me to string, again, a really tight traditional. So I haven't pulled them out too far, and I'm ready to go. So let's talk a little bit about the setup for a single string 6-shooter. That's where you're using one piece of crosslace. You're going to put this in the bottom or second to bottom hole. You've actually used that for the runners. But you're going to pull out about 18 inches and then put a knot in. This way you can use this extra 18 inches of string to attach that 6th runner to the sidewall when we put that in. Then all you're going to do is take that knot and you're going to pull the string across the leather, skipping that sidewall, the last runner. You're going to pull that all the way through, and then you'll go over the runner, which is basically just a floating sidewall, keeping it nice and wide, but also keeping the stringing relatively tight. So you don't want to have huge diamonds. Usually in a traditional pocket, you'll have 1 inch between each knot. Here you can really see it's about ½ an inch. So either way, whether you're doing multiple strings or a single string, you really want to string the same kind of traditional pocket with 2 floating sidewalls that you normally do. The only difference is, instead of letting the leathers out all the way, you only let them out about half the way. Here you can see I've kind of started that. I haven't touched the sidewall, but when I do put a sidewall in, I'll be able to use that excess string to reconnect there. So again, here I'm doing a little example of how I would do a multiple string 6-shooter pocket. I've just started on one of the leathers and I'm working my way down on one side, and then I'll repeat that on the other side, and then I would do this on the next leather over, and then I would start the last one on that last runner on the left. Either way, you're stringing a very tight traditional pocket, really the same way you would do it, except you've added in floating sidewalls. I mean, that's really the major difference. A typical traditional pocket has 2 of these trees starting. This one has 1, 2, 3. In order to do that, this is how we're going to use that loop, and that's how you would start your trees on that far left-hand side. But the important thing is to really create a tennis racket pocket, and here we go. I chose to do a pita pocket tennis racket. It's very tight. It's very similar to a girl's stick right now. There's not a lot of give to it, and as you can see, it's still very wide, but all of my knots are in there, and they're all placed correctly, and they're all tied nice and tight. This is true on a traditional 6-shooter, and it's true on a pita. Now I'm going to put in my sidewalls. Now on that traditional, I might skip that first hole because I need to put in a piece of crosslace there. But on the pita, I really don't need to do that, and I'll show you why a little bit later. So now I'm going to put in my sidewalls. And the goal of the sidewalls is to make sure that you have a knot opposite of the knot that's sitting on that outside runner. So as you can see, I'm picking sidewall holes that match up pretty closely with where those knots are. They're not perfect, but as you can see, it's pretty close. So I've got one sidewall in, and now I'm going to put in my other sidewall. There we go. Since it's a pita, the sidewalls are symmetrical. They're the same. If you're doing a traditional 6-shooter, like your normal traditional sidewall, they would be staggered or one sidewall hole lower. If you don't have any idea what I'm talking about, when I'm talking about your typical 6-shooter or 6-diamond traditional pocket, you really need to check out our stringing tutorial on YouTube for how to do a regular pocket. Now I'm pulling out the runners, which I've had run through the outside to keep them nice and wide. And I'm going to put those back through. I'm going to loosen up my leathers. Really, I'm going to try and turn this tennis racket floating sidewall pocket into something that resembles a lacrosse pocket, a true lacrosse pocket. So I'm going to run the runners back out through the outside, loosen them up a little bit, and then I'll go through and I'll loosen up the leathers, probably taking 1/2 inch to 1 inch out of my outside leathers and another 1/2 inch to 1 inch on my inside leathers. Nice and loose. How are we going to fit a ball in? How are we going to make this pocket make any sense? Yeah, you probably guessed that. We're going chopstick. Chopstick and tennis ball. Again, the tennis ball really allows you to pull tension through. I'm a big fan. It's also a little squishy, so it doesn't create such a hard, tight pocket. Now, as you can see, the stick isn't perfect. The ball doesn't sit perfectly underneath the leathers, so I need to move the leathers around. I need to move the ball around. I need to get things situated correctly. I may need to move some knots around. I may need to take some tension out. This is the time when you really focus down and make sure that everything is in the right place. Once you've done that, you're going to pull your leathers tight. You're going to pull them tight on the middle first. Try and get that middle leathers to run right down the middle of the pocket. Then you can pull those outer leathers tight. And then finally, you can pull the outer runners tight. Once you've done that and really made sure that the pocket is centered and that the ball sits in the right place, you're ready for the next step. Now for this pita, there's a neat little trick. You're going to run your last piece of cross lace through all 4 leathers, and then you're also going to run it through the tops of the runners on the outside. So all I'm going to do there is just loosen that top knot, loosen the loop, and then fit that piece of cross lace right through. Then I'll tighten things back up again. And I'll do that on both sides. Now I've got a piece of cross lace I can use to connect to the sidewall and then to the outside runner. I really want to make sure that these outside knots are tight. I know I usually say keep things taut, but in this case I do think you want to tighten them down as much as possible. You will find that looseness will come back into the furthest outside cross lace. So try to tie that down relatively tight. Your pocket should be pretty formed right now. The ball shouldn't necessarily sit on the runners, so you shouldn't have any problems tying these knots. There we've got all our knots in. As you can see, there's still some looseness, but I'll take care of that. So I'm just going to take this, since I've left that bottom hole open, run the cross lace through, and tie it off. So we've gone through, taken a little bit more tension out. Not a lot, but I'll pull some up, and then I'll pull it across to the other side. And once you've really got the tension out, you can see that those create triangles. They create V's. You can really notice it. There's no slack there. And there you go. You're pretty much all set now. Now it's time to focus on, again, making sure that your tension is right, making sure that the ball sits in the middle of the place, making sure that your knots all line up, that it's even, that it's symmetrical, or that it's asymmetrical. You really don't want to string a pocket like this, which takes so much time, and have the ball sit off to one side. So take your time, make sure that each leather, each left leather and each right leather are the same tension. Make sure that all your cross lace is the same tension. Make sure that your knots are even. And then you can put in shooting strings. I think 3 gets the job done on one of these pockets. They're heavily constructed. There's a ton of leather there. There's a ton of cross lace. You shouldn't need 4 shooting strings. You might not even need 3. 2 could do it. So the construction of this pocket is really what's important. And that's really what takes it to the next level. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and it's really shown you how to do a 6-shooter pocket. It's a heavily constructed pocket. You don't need a ton of shooting strings. It will take a long time to break in, but if you string it tight and then let it do its job, you're really going to love it. So give it a shot. Send us photos. We'd love to see what you come up with.